And somehow in all of my Eric Butterworth study, the research that I was doing, the one key mechanism that showed up repeatedly was that ultimately Eric Butterworth is trying to help each of us understand our divine significance. And I think that's very important. I'm going to ask you to keep that in mind as I go through the talk today, because it's not immediately evident, but that's just what I've extrapolated from his teachings and from his own journey. And certainly through Practical Metaphysics, the book that I am referring to today, I can see and feel that he put a lot of his energy into that book. In fact, it turns out that he taught a course in 1981 on practical metaphysics, and that course became his book. Now, to my knowledge, I couldn't find any information that indicated that the book was put into place before his death. He died in 2003, but the book was officially published in 2017. So he might not have known that there was a book out there, Practical Metaphysics, but he certainly did create the course that led to that book. And in looking for Practical Metaphysics, when I first looked, I said, who wrote Practical Metaphysics? And I wanted information. So can I have some information on the date of the first of his book? But I ended up on a different page, and it said Practical Metaphysics by Mathilde Barnett, 1889. I couldn't believe it. So there was a Practical Metaphysics out there long before Eric Butterworth's book, 1889. And any of you who understand unity, you know that 1889 is important to unity, because it was the year that Myrtle and Charles put out their first magazine, and thus began unity. And so it's also a book about healing. So there was a lot of healing stuff going on connected to metaphysics. Thank you. Very early on in the late 1800s in particular. So my experience of people who do a lot of writing is that they tend to be introverted. It takes a lot of solitude and quiet to write books. But I also saw in my research on Eric that he was prolific as well in essays and presentations. So he would do a lot of work actually delivering his messages. And they were to thousands of people at a time. So you might think that, okay, maybe he's got a little extroversion in there too, but we don't really know absolutely. But he was the guy. He was the Unity superhero that showed up and took over Unity for a couple of decades and led it, especially from New York City. The thing about Eric is that he was very precise, right? He believed that every word mattered. So he would write paper after paper, like literally an hour and a half that he could present. People would just sit there and listen to him. It wasn't our services. He would just talk for an hour and a half, and every word mattered, and he would read it explicitly from his papers. He would not deviate. He was the kind of guy who just wanted to assure that everybody had the benefit of the unity teachings. And that to me is really profound. So I sense that he was a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the word ambivert, right? So it's not introvert and it's not extrovert, but it's in the middle, right? It's the person who is social, can be, but really loves solitude. And every time I see his photo, I just get that sense that that's what he's like. And I know that I am like that too. So I have this sense that he is, I just pick up that energy from him. He was also a very gifted teacher. His stuff was right on the money. It's precise, it's profound. And his teachings took so many people into unity and also just helped them through everyday life. I'm struck by his ultimate devotion. From what I can see, was not only being the type of person who was a caretaker of unity, But also he was an authentic person, a genuine man. And he liked to really focus on the truth. How is he going to get to the truth? He's going to write as much as he can about that. And none of us possess the whole truth, but all of the world changes, the deepest questions of the human heart remain consistent. We all ask the same questions. We continue to seek meaning in our lives and belonging and connection and purpose. And it's a great way to unfold our inner wisdom and our compassion. And a lot of that belongs to that deeper cry within. And I believe that Eric was really trying to help us with that. So, themes arise in every generation, things that want to come through for all of us to look to. And I was just having a talk with a Unity member this week, and she reminded me that the main theme for her, and it's very big in the community right now, is love, that we have to bring more love to the world. We have to focus on unfolding that. And so that's what her community is doing. And I really respect and appreciate that. And I also believe that right now there's a group of timeless teachers, and they're also focused on truth again. So just like Butterworth was focused on truth in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, a lot of people are now again focusing on the truth. You might notice that in our culture, things become popular at the same time around the world. So only 10 years ago, for instance, did we start really using the word oneness. Okay. So community groups all kind of rise to a certain field of consciousness at the same time. And so oneness is there, love is coming back prolifically, as is the truth. And I believe really ultimately those two are inseparable. Love opens our hearts to truth, right? And truth teaches us to really look more deeply inside. So with that in mind, while I was looking for information on Eric, I found this beautiful little poem, and I thought like it just really touched my heart. And I believe that a little bit in this poem is why Eric would write at all. Why would any of us seek to write if not to support people? So here's this poem. It's called Gather Up the Lost Souls by Athie Thompson. I shall gather up all the lost souls that wander the earth, all the ones who are alone, all the ones who are broken, and all the ones who never really fitted in. I shall gather them all up, and together we shall find a home. Actually, Athie said, we shall find our home. And I love that. I believe that a lot of us at Unity have been lost souls, and that Eric was one of those people who helped gather us together to find our home. Because home is about safety and security. And when you read the Butterworth books, you may very well find, like myself and a lot of other people have, that there's a lot of safety and security in knowing more about ourselves. Another thing that really struck home while I was reading Eric, I mean, I've been reading him since the 80s, so this is not new to me, but he just struck me as someone who's trying to reach one person at a time, to really go in and find the messages that attune us with ourself. So I want to tell you this little story. There was this little fella, somewhere, between 11 and 12, and he's walking along the sand along the ocean. Someplace he's walking with a big stick, and he's looking for little glass, and funky shells and funky stones. He's walked there many times with his parents and his grandparents. And he's walking along sand, and he comes across this magnificent starfish. And he looks at it, and he said, oh my gosh, you are beautiful. You're so beautiful. But if I leave you here now, you're going to die. He knew. He'd walked, there's so many times with family that he knew that that starfish had washed in with the waves, but now needed help to get out back to sea. So he picked up that starfish as gently as possible, and he stepped out into the ocean several feet. And with as much love and yet tenderness as he could provide, he threw that starfish as far as he could, because he didn't want it to have to come back in the next wave. Then he walked out all drenched in water, back to the sand, picked up his stick, and started along his way again. But he didn't see that somebody had watched him. Some old guy on a blanket just sitting there by the ocean. And he said, "Hey, kid." And the boy looks at him and says, "Yes." He said, "You can't save them all." And the kid says, "No, sir. But it made a difference for that one." And he kept walking. From the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 40. We hear, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Now, this is Jesus talking, but he represents everybody because the kingdom is within. He is a part of the whole. He knew that. He was our first New Thought teacher. And he celebrates that anything you do to help anything or anyone, you do for everybody. We may not solve every problem, but our contributions matter to those we do help. And I truly believe that Eric Butterworth knew that. And that's why he was so clear-minded and adamant to get as much of the joy and the treasures of unity out into the world community to support them. And he could and feel that one person at a time was gathering the information and the support from within for their highest good. I believe his contribution is eternal. It has eternal value. So when I think of practical metaphysics, I think, for some reason, I think of quantum. It always comes up. Maybe it's because I think of quantum physics. It's not practical metaphysics, but it is a multidimensional experience, right? Whereas practical metaphysics is understanding the dimensions within. And there's a practical way to do this. It's about the nature of our being and all the questions that go with it. And if you read practical metaphysics, you'll see how it is the ultimate textbook for people who love unity and metaphysics, because it's a great guide. And I believe it kind of picked up where Charles was actually, well, not where he left off, but what he was trying to say. Because Charles was a profound, prolific writer as well. And he blew me away with his intelligence and he's like a prophet. And Eric wanted to perpetuate the great teachings that also Charles had started. The thing about metaphysics is that it requires us to understand our beingness. Okay? So questions that we often ask when we're understanding who we are is, well, not only who am I, but why am I here? What is mine to do? And even if you have hours and hours and hours with friends to talk about all this, there's just this spaciousness, this empty place that requires us to keep seeking, to look for more, because nobody else can answer all those questions They're guides. Anybody who gives us the answer is a guide to do more work inside. And I found that in Butterworth's work, that's what he's doing. He's guiding us to do that inner work. And the thing I love about asking a question is that the answer is immediately there. It's there. You just have to now listen carefully, and you will see how quickly that comes to your awareness at many levels. So when we ask these questions, and I think probably most of us have at one point, we have found ourselves at unity. And unity must somehow align vibrationally with what you're seeking, because it has a spiritual style. Unity has its own vibration, its own style. And because of your questioning, you would then draw yourself to unity. And it might come across in different ways. It'll come across as somebody showing up to take you there. So you've got to come with me. You got to check this out. Or it might be that you just wandered by the sign one day, or an advertisement. Maybe you were born into unity and this is your constant vibration. But do you feel, as Butterworth is trying to gather information to support us in doing so, do you feel at home? I know unity is for me a home. And I have to ask, have some of your questions been answered? I hope so. I hope some of your questions have been answered. And if you want more information and more support and more understanding, then definitely Butterworth is the way to go. Picking up one of his books would be really awesome. But I would wait until we've gone through these 3 weeks, because then you'll see that there's at least a few options there for you. So have you still been asking, what is my destiny? What is mine to do? Because if you have, please know this: the destiny that you are living now will be the destiny for the rest of your life. Constant. You are constantly divinely significant. And right up until your last breath, you will be significant, and you will continue to be significant where you go next. It matters that we understand that the inner planes, the allness that we're guided to by Butterworth is rich, and we are a part of that, always significant. And Eric's books help us to unravel this knowledge so that we can understand what our divine significance is. So I'm a firm believer that if you want real answers, then you better check out the deeper meanings and find truth, seek the truth. And Butterworth sought the truth. He got rid of all the myths, and he brought only that deeper awareness of us, getting through life with our interdependence, with this inner wisdom, this guidance. He had no need to lie to us. And I find that a lot of the religious world tells a lot of lies so that they can gather people together and keep them close, have some kind of control, have some kind of power to force people sometimes into what they don't want, but not at unity. And Butterworth was clear on that. He helps you come back to your own power. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people have used unity in recovery, because unity does define the divine as within you and allowing you to feel that connection to that great power. And this is all throughout Eric Butterworth's books. So did you ever notice that when you were growing up, people tended to say, so what are you going to be when you grow up? Right? Going to be like your dad? You're going to be an accountant? Or you're going to be like your mom? You're going to be a teacher? But did you ever notice that nobody ever asked you, do you know who you are yet? Before they were trying to help you decide what you're going to be. Like, really? Like, just tell me. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a cop. I'm going to be whatever, just like mom or dad or whatever. But we never had the chance to sit and to say, who am I? Why am I here? Certainly my generation didn't have that. Wouldn't it be great if they put these questions in the social studies of school, at school, in this educational system, that you get to ask these deep metaphysical questions and learn about yourself before you have to figure out what you're going to be later. You know, it's more logical, rational to do it that way. And they certainly don't leave a lot of room in our educational system to recognize that we are divinely significant, but we do have to perpetuate that at some level. And most of us find unity a little later. You know, I've met a few people, of course, who were raised in unity, and but a lot of us found unity as we went along. So not only do we have questions, but I believe that Eric Butterworth wrote all his questions out and then decided that he was going to answer them all. And those are in all of his 16 books. That's a lot of writing. That's a lot of knowledge. But I believe he really went in to understand, who am I? He was a deep metaphysical seeker. So before I go actually into the book, and I won't read too much about that, but I will go into the book a little bit. I want to tell you a little bit about him because he is considered to be a unity legend. He's a spiritual icon of our movement. And he's, like I said, he's authored 16 best-selling books, not just at Unity, but around the world, on metaphysical spirituality. He's a gifted theologian, a philosopher, a lecturer, and for over 50 years, he helped thousands of people to help themselves. Some people have said that he was like the Ralph Waldo Emerson of the 20th century. Ralph was the original grandfather to unity, the transcendentalist leader. So get this, Eric Butterworth was born in Winnipeg. Yay! He's a true blue Canadian at heart in 1916. So, but I think he had a single mom and at one point, and she took him to California. And that's when he ended up studying at Fresno State and then moved into Ohio for the Capital University there, where he actually studied music. But then he got engaged in Unity. And so during World War II, he's at Unity and he's studying away at the Village. And then 1941 hits, and of course, all American men are called to war. So he goes, joins the Medical Corps, and he's there for a few years. When he gets back, he's immediately back at Unity. And he graduated in 1948 as a minister. So while he was a minister, he established 3 main unities. He started the Unity of Pittsburgh. He went off to start the very large Detroit ministry. And then he started an even larger ministry in New York City. So he was actually teaching in Carnegie Hall to 2,000 people a week. Then he went to Town Hall. Then he went to the Avery Fisher Hall, which is where you can have several thousand people, and he did. That's how prolific unity was during his time. His devotees were from all walks of life, and he even got the ear of Oprah Winfrey. She had him on her show, and his book, Discover the Power Within You, is an amazing book. So Practical Metaphysics is more of a theory book, and Discover the Power Within You is more of an inner development book. So I really, really recommend that one as well. Going hand in hand, those two are awesome. And Oprah said that this book changed my perspective on life and religion. Eric Butterworth teaches that God isn't up there. He exists inside each one of us. And it's up to us to seek the divine within. Now, that's pretty profound, because you know how far and wide Oprah reaches. So I'm so happy that Eric got to speak on Oprah. And of course, that just led more people to unity. Oprah's greatest teacher was Maya Angelou, and of course, she was a unity member as well. So I want to thank Eric Butterworth for his profound teachings, his many gifts, his many books, because man, did he ever leave us a legacy. I am just thrilled to bits with all of his great teachings. I want to take you just through a few of his chapters, not all of it. But his first chapter, he talked about the allness of God, and his second chapter, divinity of man. His third chapter, thinking. His fourth chapter, the spoken word. 5 was about faith, and 6, 7, and 8 were about love and prayer and demonstration or actions, which is wonderful. So if I go into the allness of God, what comes to mind for you at that moment? The allness of God. What comes to your mind and your heart? And are you actually hearing a principle in there somewhere? So when I was reading this chapter, it struck me that the allness of God is a reflection of God as the one power and presence through everything, everywhere. His first chapter is a way of exploring our first principle, really dramatic exploration. So I highly recommend you have a look at that. In the beginning was the allness. He says we must unlearn the idea that metaphysics is a thing rather than a way of seeing life that must be practiced. He's truly about looking inward at our being and practicing the tools to understand it. That's what practical metaphysics really esteems. And then he goes on to say that there's a perfect whole, and because we sense that perfect whole, we have an urge for transcendence to find and know God. Now, transcendence, again, I've mentioned this before, is to transcend beyond the physical. We want to know a God that is beyond our body. That's transcendentalism. But New Thought moved that more deeply into an inward experience, right? And Butterworth affirms that because he says we are an eachness of that wholeness, and that is a blessing. All right. I want to quote something that he also said, but it wasn't something I found in the book. It's something from another book, probably. And he said, God does not come in because he never went out. I love that. God didn't come in to help us out because it never left. We need to remember that all the time. God is not only in all, or the essence, I like to call it the essence, the divine essence, is not only in all, but it is all. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. So if I go to the second chapter, It's called The Divinity of Man. Now, why is that familiar? The divinity of man. It could be principle number 2. So to be clear, the principles were not written yet when he wrote this, because they were written by the granddaughter of the Fillmores later in the 80s, I believe. So to give us something to reach into the community with, to say, okay, here's our basic structure, just so you know, because how do you explain unity? The principles are perfect. But she probably read a lot of Butterworth and could see that he was really expressing the principles. Chapter 1 is the first principle. Chapter 2 is the second principle that we find out later. Divinity of man refers to, I am an aspect of God, therefore I am inherently all that God is. And we say good. We could say healthy. We could say intelligent. We could say wise, etc. And he says, man is the image and likeness of God. We've heard that many points. But he says, the Christ in you, the hope of glory, does not refer to Jesus, but to Christ, which was discovered by Jesus. Was discovered by Jesus. So what he's saying is that Jesus was the first person we know of who lived the Christ consciousness. Okay. So he knows that this is the God possibility in everybody, you too. That now Christ is just a word. You could call it the star, you could call it the light, you could call it the happiness, whatever, but it just became a word that people use. It actually means anointed one. Okay, the word Christ. And it's a good understanding to have. If you remember, it means anointed one. It means that the person has moved up to the higher wisdom, because you're anointed usually on the forehead. And with that wisdom, you were able to enter states of consciousness. And those consciousness levels have led to the highest level, which is the Christ. And if you ever want to read about it, you can buy the book Power versus Force and pick up the David Hawkins book. It's a great book. So I always like to see similar quotes. So what other Unity person quoted something similar to what Eric was saying? So I have a Charles quote, of course, because they talk a lot about the same things. He cautions against imagining a far-off God and instead redirects attention to the spark of divinity within. Man has formed in his mind a far-off God, ignoring the spark of divinity shining in his own being. And that divinity, when you live that to its highest potential, is what Eric was referring to as the Christ. Just so you know. So then we move on to chapter 3. Thinking is chapter 3. Well, of course it is, which would, of course, be what? Right, principle number 3. At Unity in Ottawa, we say our heart guides our thoughts to create our highest good. So actually, I think we're the only community who puts heart in the principles that I've ever read, because the heart is becoming more remembered because it goes way, way back, thousands of years, to the Sufis. And now people are starting to talk about it more. If you look at the Heart Math Institute, or people are always now starting to refer to the heart. And so that's why we put it in, because it is known to receive the information of the world around us just a spark faster than the brain collects the information. So he talks about our thinking and the value of our thinking. And something that came up while I was doing this research, because a lot of people say, when we think, what happens with our thoughts? Right? We're going to have a couple things happen. We're going to have an emotional reaction, or we're going to have a physical reaction, or we're going to have, So what I found out was that emotions can occur without conscious thought. So you can actually get to an emotion before you think. It indicates that thoughts and emotions can both influence each other. So most of us say, oh, I'm thinking this, therefore I'm sad. But what science has proven is that you can actually be sad before you think you're sad. You can actually feel sad. You actually feel happy before you go, oh, that was great, right? So it goes back and forth. There's no absolute here. And that's something that has been in my questioning for years. I've always wondered, and finally the science is catching up with the question. It's always been there, but it was hard to find. So he says the very first step in the art of thinking is to know that we always have a choice. We can become the master instead of the slave. We can become a creative thinker instead of a reflex thinker. So his words, reflex, now we would say reactive, a reactive thinker. We have to take responsibility for our thoughts so we can change our life. So those are the basic understandings of Mr. Eric Butterworth. I could go on, but I won't. We're not going to keep you that much longer. So your call to action this week is to spend some time sitting quietly and talking to your heart and remembering that you are divinely significant. And with that divine awareness of your significance, what is mine to do? What is mine to do? So when you get a word or a sentence, you might get a paragraph, right? What is mine to do? I'm going to ask you to take those words, take small sentences, and then go to truthunity.net, truthunity.net, okay? And put in your word, one at a time. Maybe you have 3 words. Put one word in at a time. Or put one little phrase. And then in the search button in the upper right corner, and then press enter and see what comes up and see what value you can gather from some other metaphysical support coming out of Truth Unity that might help you unfold more of your divine significance. And I think that's a wonderful thing to try. So there you have it. I recommend Eric Butterworth. So I'm going to take you through a gentle meditation. Breathe in gently and slowly and connect to Mother Earth, remembering we are a part of this beautiful, magnificent being that is the earth, as well as we are connected to the divine within. Breathing in and out gently and slowly, saying these words, the divine within me is gloriously receptive to my choosing to be in it, with it, in awareness. We light up together and we expand the goodness and the intelligence, the compassion and the loving expression of being connected profoundly and together. What a blessing it is to be one with my divine light, the oneness, the infinite source. And through all that is, I am more fully awake, aware, and ready. And willing to do good for my family, my community, and my earthly family. I care for the trees around me. I care to keep the flowers blooming as long as they can. I love the leaves that arrive later, and I watch them blow in the wind with an openness that they are not lost, but have given me great joy while they were here and are now ready to feed the earth again. My light guides me to profoundly know the outpourings of the divine in my world, how I can behave to reap the ongoing rewards of such a just and loving awareness, and how I can manage the difficulties of life in this wholeness, its wisdom, its guidance, its supportive anchor that always keeps me in flow with a healthy, loving life. And for all this, I am grateful. I'm grateful for the peace that my divinity rests and never leaves, even when the rest of us are challenged. My divinity is not. It is pure peace, always waiting for me to fall back into my natural loving flow. I'm completely loved. And when I'm one again with this peace, I know it. Absolutely. Thank you, infinite loving source of peace and of light. You're my greatest expression, and I love you.